Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. With every conversation, we hope to inspire as many as possible to keep on Dungeon Mastering.
And I'm DM Neal, aka Joke Maniac.
And I'm DM Derrick, aka How Not to DM.
And today we're going to be restarting a series that definitely didn't have a name before, making it very difficult to find the episodes previously. So we're going to restart the series about the classes found in Dungeons and Dragons, and it'll be entitled Stay Classy.
And so this week we decided to go over the, some would say, most basic class, but some also would say the most foundational class of D&D, which is the Fighter. And we're going to chat about the Fighter with our good friend from the What Am I Rolling podcast and the DM's Book Club podcast, Fiona.
But we have a couple of housekeeping things to get out of the way, and I know some of our listeners are very intrigued with the idea that there might be a couple winners here.
They are. So, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen with Neal so that together we are going to find out the 3 winners of the Dungeon Master's Block 2024 Rulebook giveaway.
This just has your name 100 times. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, joke's on you suckers. I'm keeping the books. They're all mine. No, okay, let's start with the 2 physical book winners, and then we will give away the 3rd set, which is the digital set. Without further ado, I'm going to click the add random winner button, and it's going to pick someone. The first winner of our book giveaway is Meg Boyd. Congratulations, Meg, on being our first winner. We will reach out to you shortly to your email address you provided and ask for some information so we can get your books to you. I saw Meg tweeting religiously every day about this, so
yeah, this is a really cool system. I was not prepared to be as enthralled as I am, listener. This makes this very easy. We should shout out this system for anyone that needs
Rafflecopter if you're ever trying to give away stuff. It's pretty easy. The next winner of another physical set of the 3 core rule books is Joey Fournier, another person I'm pretty sure I saw tweeting a lot using that system to get as many points as possible. Congrats, Joey, on winning a set of the physical books. You're going to have so much fun with them. And last but not least, the winner of the digital books on D&D Beyond is going to be Kyle Morrill. Again, I saw Kyle posting a lot. It seems like that was the way to get the W. Congrats, Kyle, on your digital books. We will be in contact to get you the access codes shortly. So, congrats on winning, and we are so grateful to you for being listeners of the DM's Block, and we hope that you enjoy the heck out of those books, and they bring many fond memories to you and your table.
And now that we have a system that we enjoy, that has worked well for us, I can say with the utmost confidence when new books come out, as long as we still have enough extra copies, that we'll be doing the exact same thing for those books as well.
Definitely. All right. Congrats to the winners. Be checking your emails religiously, and we will be in contact shortly.
But with that, let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meats?
The flat meat's back on the menu, boys.
And today for the meat, we have Fiona Howat, who is a TTRPG actual play performer, a podcaster, an improviser, and a voice actor, and also one of my good friends. Welcome to the show, Fiona.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, guys. I very much appreciate it. What a nice room you got us in. Oh, it's very lovely. Oh.
Yeah, the decorating behind you, we spent a lot of time on that. All those beautiful
you know what?
posters.
And I appreciate the goblet of wine that you've given me as well. Thank you.
It's
great.
hard to argue. I have the same microphone. I have the same calendar. So as far as I know,
yeah,
we might be in the same room.
The same room, yeah.
Someday that would be fun to be in the same room. Mm-hmm. But Fiona, I know what you do, but some of the listeners may not be familiar with some of your work. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about how you got into TTRPGs, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So if you've been living under a rock for the last half a decade, I am Fiona. I run a couple of different sort of projects that are TTRPG related, mostly the host of What Am I Rolling, which is a twice monthly tabletop RPG one-shot podcast. And yeah, I got into this TTRPG business because I'm a nerd, really. I started off in the old days when I first finished university. I used to play a sport which is now known as quad ball, but originally was called Quidditch. The less we said about that, the better. But it got me into like talking about nerdy things and obviously meeting lots of different people after university. And someone was like, "Oh, you should try out this weird thing called Dungeons and Dragons." I was like, okay. I tried it out. I was like, I love this. This will be my whole personality for as long as I can foresee it. And what I discovered was that I really loved role-playing games, but I didn't know the rules. And there's always that thing where, you know, you're playing with people who seem to know the rules or just like will go, well, actually, that's not how a mimic works and all that sort of thing. So I decided I would go away and learn other TTRPGs and then run those instead, because then no one could question me because I know the rules and they didn't, which I know seems like backwards logic, but actually it helped me obviously learn about different RPG systems. And then coming back to D&D, I've actually played a lot of, obviously D&D, that was sort of what I started with, but actually running D&D, I've not run as much as compared to other systems. So yeah, that's how I sort of got into it. And then through the podcast, through meeting other designers and stuff like that, I then got into sort of improvisation, which has then been my other sort of big hobby / slightly professional thing. I've been doing some teaching on that. And yeah, it's kind of been my life for the last, like I said, half a decade or so. You always hear people that go, I've been this since the 1970s. And you're like, that's lovely. To think about, like, I'd only just got into this before the pandemic is wild, because it feels like yesterday, but also a long time ago. So I always have to sort of caveat that by going like, hey, it doesn't matter how long it takes you to get into something or what age you get into something. Just don't worry about it, because experience and age isn't an issue anymore.
Right, and I would argue that you have played, you know, probably 100 more games than any of those 50-year D&D veterans at this point, right? So, you know, who's the more richer for it?
I mean, I'm not counting, but yes, probably is the answer.
I've listened to most of them, so there's a lot.
Yeah, it's often what I think when someone's like, it's been all these years. I'm like, well, but how often did you play? Because, you know, the person with the right amount of time and the right group and the right, you know, everything coming together, I'm like, you're going to outpace me. And I started in second edition, but I don't play that often or run games that often. Like I am easily outpaced, listener. I do spend a lot of time learning, and certainly so that I can give the best advice I can imagine. But other than that, I'm just searching for the next game.
Yes, aren't we all?
So the other question we have, so is there anything that you're currently working on? And unfortunately, our caveat, as always, that you can tell us about.
Oh, of course. I mean, sadly, I'm not one of those people that's under NDAs left, right, and centre. But please, if you consider it, please do. I'm currently in the middle of running a Blades in the Dark campaign over on the RP Geeks. I'm 1/3 of their sort of team right now. And that is, I mean, I'm sure everyone here has heard of Blades in the Dark, but it is, you're playing sort of scoundrels in a Victoriana haunted city. It's surrounded by lightning barriers, and which is powered by demon blood. So, you know, all the good stuff. I'm also working on as yet untitled horror podcast anthology, where we're doing different RPG systems and telling different stories, almost like in a style of sort of American Horror Stories, but in VHS form. So you'd like different volumes and different horror stories that might have an overarching connection at some point. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing for the last couple of months, just working on those little things whilst having moved to a completely different country and just trying to get myself settled and see what the next step is. So those are the kind of things I'm working on just now.
Have you gotten to the point where you look the right way when you are crossing a street yet?
No, I'm constantly still walking on the wrong side and get beeped. And yeah, it doesn't make any difference. I've decided I've just accepted this at this point. Yeah. I will never unlearn these things. And to be honest, being in a car scares me still. Like, I can't believe you drive on the way you do, and sometimes just go through a red light because it seems appropriate. Wild. Anyway.
I feel the same way, and I've been driving only here my entire
Well, there you go. Life. You see what I mean?
Yeah, it took me like a few months of being in the UK to like rewire my brain to look the correct way when I was crossing a street. But then I came back and it was the same problem all over again. I had to unwire myself. Anyway, I can appreciate how difficult that is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the surprise question is so you've already used several terms, like, and I'm tracking right along with you. What I've always find is like the term university out here is like such a prestige where it's like most places are just, it's a college.
Yeah.
It has to level up into a university. That's its subclass. But the idea of like, are there any TTRPG terms that you feel like you use that surprise like the US listener?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess I could tell you, which might lead on to it, is that I am a big fan of, when I read through TTRPGs, of having very special names for the GM or the DM. Because it feels like then you're immersed. Because player characters get like, like, oh, they're heroes or they're agents. There's this. And then sometimes it's like, and for you, the facilitator. I'm like, no, that's boring. Don't want that. Hate that. So I always try and find interesting ways to introduce myself as the narrator or something like that. One that the RP Geeks use is Fate Weaver as a sort of go-to term, which I quite like as a way of telling stories. I recently read a sample of Triangle Agency, which is a bit like Paranoia in a way. Like, again, you're playing sort of agents in the field that are sorting out anomalies. And what I love about it is that the person that's running the game is called the General Manager or the GM, which I just thought was great as a result. Again, it's stuff like that, Master of Ceremonies or the Gatekeeper or the Groundskeeper, all that sort of thing. I like that because it makes you feel that you're in them. But lots of people, I think, in the US just, again, going to that whole thing like, oh, well, an RPG, you mean Dungeons & Dragons, like the Dungeon Master? I think that's the thing. So when I introduce myself as the Fate Weaver, again, it's more of a grandiose thing for myself, I think, than and try to impress people where they go, oh, a bit weird. Must be a British thing,
No, but I love that idea also, especially if I was thinking of, like, if I was at a con game that had a certain theme and choosing not to just simply be a Dungeon Master. If it was like a really like horror-based theme, would I call myself the Crypt Keeper and make that weird laugh that thing does?
Right.
That never scared me as a child, because I'm like, that there are so many things I don't know who instilled this in me, but I was not afraid of most things as a child because I was like, kick it, just kick it hard. That thing will absolutely fall apart. Chucky will fly across this room. So that little thing on that bike and saw, not a chance. Just kick it.
Yeah.
It's not large enough to stand up to a strong kick. So
yeah, strong kick. Okay, good philosophy. I'll keep that in mind next time I'm in a saw puzzle. Yeah,
I accidentally that carried on another generation because I was like, guys, you need to be careful here at the park. Those ducks might bite you. And my child immediately, without hesitation, was like, I will kick it. Well, all right.
Yes, it might work. That's great. Love that.
The Dungeon Master's Block does not suggest kicking wildlife as a good form of avoid.
I endorse it though, as Fiona. Please.
As in the small addendum, unless it bit you first.
Sure.
Yes, self-defense.
Self-defense. Oh, okay.
Speaking of fighting, so today on Stay Classy, we are going to be talking about the fighter. And we are restarting our class series because we, one, never finished it. Two, we also have a whole new edition, and I think it's been long enough, certainly, since some of those episodes have come out, that not only are there rule changes, I think there are also very different views on the certain classes depending on how just culture and everything surrounding it has changed. So, but my first question will be, Fiona, what brought you to the fighter? Because I gave you the full list, but that was the one where you're like, this is the one. We need to talk about the fighter.
So this is my secret. I've never played a fighter. I've never ever ran them or anything like that because I think no one actually runs them or plays them because they're too busy thinking, but I want to be a cool warlock character. I want to be a barbarian. I want to be this. And they're like, oh, fighters are boring. And I know this is not true. I want to put it to you folks and people listening, is that fighters actually not only are the easiest people to run, but also you can do so much with them and so much versatile. And this is also a challenge for me that the next D&D game I play, I want to play a fighter. I don't want to be like my head turned because of spells or because I can do extra damage or I can do this, that, and the other. I want to do a fighter, but also have a specific role in the world, which you can do with the flavoursome subclasses that you get.
That gave me a lot of thoughts. I think I will stay on track. Let's stay on track. So one of the things we also need to talk about and get out of the way is, what is a fighter? So I already hear some pages flipping on someone's desk, and that's also because we're all in the same room.
Yes.
Derek, do you want to give us a brief rundown of what is a fighter?
So the first paragraph in the brand new D&D 2024 Player's Handbook, I actually have on my desk the one that we are giving away to whichever lucky listener has been announced as the winner. So yeah, you get to read out of this same book eventually, lucky winner. It says here, fighters rule many battlefields, questing knights, royal champions, elite soldiers, and hardened mercenaries. As fighters, they all share an unparalleled prowess with weapons and armor. And they are all well acquainted with death, both meeting it out and defying it. So, yeah, I think Fighter does trace back to the original game, D&D, and it has always existed. And it's always kind of played this role, like you were saying, Fiona, of like, not basic, but what's the word I'm looking for?
No, I
it's
think
classic.
Basic is it.
It fits a very classic archetype from high fantasy stories, from which D&D draws heavily. There's, in just about every sword and sorcery story, there is someone who doesn't necessarily lean on magic to do what they do best. They have practiced with their blade or their bow or whatever it is, and they are very good at that. And that's kind of what they bring to the table. That's what they're good at, and that's what, even if it's not leaning on the more fantastical tropes of magic or that kind of thing, it definitely fills a very valuable and interesting role.
Yeah, I think that. I feel like my pitch would be that in a real world, like say the multidisciplinary team in a hospital, like normally you say the doctor, so you think maybe the cleric or the paladin or something like that. But I do think the fighter is the person that you go to and it just does the job. But there's so many different ways you can flavor it there, in everything. And it's one of those things where, again, I used to poo-poo it. I used to not care about like fighters. I thought you have to be all these different things. But actually, because the way the subclasses are, and also I would say if you ever look up in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, they have these sort of battle master options. So one of the subclasses is like if you want to flavor it more, suddenly you get these options of like, well, actually, who is this fighter? They're not just some generic sort of mook, but also they could be a banner guard, they could be a bodyguard, they could be a brawler. So that means, okay, of what? That means maybe they're related to someone or have a relationship with someone else in the party as a result, and then you have that backstory that already sort of keyed in. So that's why I was like, oh, actually, rather than having this sort of the edgelord, this, that, and the other, maybe you have this thing because there's like a status relationship that you can get through because of what you've chosen.
I feel like in 5e, the fighter was most often used as like a 2-level dip for multiclassing to get the second wind and to get the action surge, and that's kind of a lot of what I saw it used as. There are a few people who in like prominent actual plays were playing fighters and were playing them well, but yeah, oftentimes it seemed like it was just kind of utility, get a couple of mechanical bonuses out of it, and then go somewhere else, go in a different direction. But yeah, I think you're right. Like if you think of a good way to weave them into the story or to give them an interesting backstory, then you don't have to look other places to find what's interesting about them.
And I'd say like if you played them completely, go all the way to level 20, you get 3 extra attacks if you attack. No other class really does that. And I just think that's if you want to go all in, yeah, maybe it's not about the damage, but maybe you're utilizing it in some way. So I can imagine that sort of final boss battle you're having. You'll have your magic equipment and armor, and you'll be buffed up by your party members. The end of the day, I think it's just there's something telling about a story where the person that helps and fights and leads the party maybe is a fighter. And that's such a cool thing. I think that they're not necessarily strengthened by like potions or like they're not using magical weave. It's just a normal person just going about their job, and they save the day. I'm always a big fan of mundane people and the stories about mundane things in extraordinary circumstances. So that's what I think you could play with here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that stood out to me, and I was trying to dig through and see how it was presented in 2014, but in 2024, they more prominently display for each class what stat you should use. And
yes.
There's only one class where it says or between it. Most of them are one stat. Some are this and that, which immediately speaks to the complexity of each of those, monk and so on and so forth. But only the fighter says or. So it says strength or dexterity. And that is your first clue, straight up, like first facing clue that this is a class that is more versatile.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate every guest we have because usually you're going to unlock something that like I think I've already known, but now I can actually like put words to. But what I recognize now, having played through second, third, fourth, is that there is, with the simplicity of the mechanics surrounding the fighter, that you can remove that, almost remove it as a barrier, and then develop your story more. Especially when I think about third edition, oftentimes your fighter would just like whatever weapon it was, that's just what you did. Every level up was, I will make the thing at the end of this arm do more damage. Mm-hmm. I will make it hit more. I will make it special. Like that's all you're doing. But because of that, you kind of know what you're going to do when you get into combat. So then the rest of your character can start to develop more. And it's like you said, why am I fighting? Because everyone can become a fighter. Am I choosing to use my hands? Am I long range? Am I short range? I could easily be a fighter that chooses to use 2 daggers and make that work because I lean on my dexterity. Or I just have a giant stick.
Yeah.
And I just carry it around and hit things. And even that, but that's because I come from this group of warriors that learned how to train with sticks. But we are also the temple guard. Or we are the task force that just goes around and stops the monsters from, laying waste to all of these villages in this area. Or I just really like to fight people, and I do so at my own peril.
Yeah, like the task, like I said, Tasha's called of everything. They have these battle master builds, and the one that really appealed to me, as silly as it sounds, is the pugilist, just a boxer. And you think to yourself,
Always.
when will that ever come into a fantasy? Like, you're up against a dragon, is that going to work? And like, doesn't matter. What other stories can we tell with a boxer? Maybe they're the star of this traveling troupe that's going around from tournament to tournament, and then they also, solve crime or help out as they go traveling around. It's just a different way of like flavoring it, so they're not just like, yes, stab, shield, done. Especially when you have stuff like the paladin, which is also like the knight in shining armor. You have the ranger, the person with the archery, and then the fighter in the middle is like, well, do you not want to be a better version of those? You're like, well, you don't have to be those. You could be something else entirely. So I definitely see that.
So the next question is, how have we used fighters at our tables, or how have they been utilized at our tables, whether we were running the games or whether we were a part of the games? I'll kick it off. Fiona, you made an excellent point earlier about how the fighter can really shine with those extra attacks, especially at high level. And I experienced this with my last game that ended a few years ago. My friend Matthew was playing a fighter. He picked the archery fighting style. But, in the final combat, he is making 4 attacks a turn with, really strong magic weapons, magical items like you were saying. And, he's able to action surge and make 8 attacks in a turn, stacking advantage and stuff. And he, was dealing a lot of damage. You do have spellcasters who can cast high level spells, and you've got paladins who can smite, but consistently turn after turn being able to deal that much damage. I had to account for that and, be prepared for that, especially in this final combat, because I knew what he brought to the table. But, if that's really what you like, is you like the combat, you like dealing a lot of damage. Or from a DM's perspective, you have a player who really focuses on that or likes that. You can give them a lot of opportunities to do fun stuff with their builds and feel heroic, especially even if you're kind of leaning into the mundanity of a fighter at the final levels there. So that's a really fun way that it worked out for us. Was he didn't get the killing blow, but he definitely did a lot of damage. Unfortunately, the person he did the most damage to was actually a simulacrum. You got to pull out all the stops for the last bosses, right? But it was a lot of fun to see them just plow through him, the simulacrum in the first couple turns, and then me get to introduce the actual villain afterward. Anyway, it was a good time.
I think I've seen it, and I know Critical Role has 1 or 2 fighters as well. And it's just, again, you can see them going through like, okay, what kind of maneuvers do I want? Do I want to be someone that is quick, someone that does extra damage, etc.? But I've always been a big fan of when they use the Indomitable. It's on level 9 for the new player's handbook. I don't know if it's changed elsewhere. But just this idea that if you fail a saving throw, you re-roll it with a bonus equal to your fighter level, and you must use this new roll. I know that's slightly different, but I just thought that's such a cool thing that you fail something and you go, no, I've got one chance, and it's not like you're spending a resource or anything like that. It's just that sort of thing, like the proper anime moment. You look up for your fringe and you go, not today, and you stab, and you are the your needle, you're the lady in Game of Thrones. It's all those sort of things together. Just really like that.
Oh, you're talking about when she kills the Night King? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Not today.
Spoilers.
Anyway,
best out ages ago.
Right.
But like the best level up for like a skill, I think, is Indomitable, in the idea that, because once you're level 17, that's a plus 17 when you roll it. And you're going to use it when that, especially that thing that you're typically not going to just eat. Like, you're a fighter, you're probably just going to eat that fireball and be like, well, there went some of my health, but not all of it, so we're fine. But then it's the kind of thing where it's like the Illithid Lord decides, no, I'd like you to just fight for me now. And then, like you said, no, Indomitable, I'm going to go ahead and roll, and then plus 17, plus 20 to say, no, not today. In fact, this is a stab. But
no, you get the Uno Reverso card out. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the part where you dig deep again through the anime bangs. There, you're digging deep and hanging on when something should work on you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I would love if a player just slapped one down on the table and Uno reverse if they rolled well.
Yeah,
I'd be like,
I like that.
Immediate inspiration, and then I would take the card and wait until they least expected it and play it again.
That's a great idea. I talked earlier about how I feel like the fighter was more used for subclass or for multi-classing in the previous edition, and I think they definitely tried to address it with the weapon mastery types. In addition to being able to play a battle master, you have different ways you can flavor using your weapons that gives you more control of the battlefield instead of just roll, swing sword, that hits or doesn't hit, right? There's some extra dimensions you can add. And I feel like that, especially for creative players who really like that aspect of combat, I think this is going to definitely reward those types of players as well.
Yeah, and there are a lot of other features built in now to the idea that, because it's the same concept as casting a spell and it missing, but that's a very specific resource that you happen to have. And you have other ways where when like, oh, well, then I just don't want to roll. I will make them roll, but that's not really afforded to the fighter. You will always be rolling to hit. And those misses feel just devastating because it could, up until you get the extra attack, that was it. Like, you missed, and that was your whole turn, just making it a little windier in the general area of the monster. But the idea that there's a lot of features that are starting to be built in to kind of counteract that, or at least feel like you're, failing forward.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, like the graze, for instance. If you miss, you still graze them. You still do a little damage, stuff like that, which makes it feel, I guess, slightly more realistic as a tabletop role-playing game can be without, calculating geometry and physics and that kind of thing. But I do like the new weapon masteries. And other classes obviously get those too, but I think, let me just double check. Does a fighter get more weapon masteries than a barbarian or a ranger?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's just it offers something. The new one, just defense is recommended. But when you gain a fighter level, you can replace it with a different fighting style. So again, they have this new thing with the new 2024. It's like, every time you have a long rest, you can rechange your cantrips and something. And that's something I've always done. I'm like, if it's not working out for you, it's fine. So same sort of thing here. If defense is not working, maybe you want to do, let's see, like the thrown weapon fighting. Maybe you want to do protection instead. So maybe I like that. So that I like that because depending on where you are in the adventure, maybe you're going to be doing more actual like 2-weapon fighting rather than interception, for example. So you might want to switch them out. So I appreciate that it's in writing. It's something that I would do normally anyway, but it's nice that it's in writing because it wasn't there before.
Yeah, maybe someone hadn't thought of it, right? And this kind of gives them the options. Yeah, so the fighter has gotten a lot more. It's been given more dimensions to deal with, which is fun to use.
Yeah, I will say, like, again, with the new 2024, they've got this new. I mean, they've always had epic boons, but I quite like the epic boon that they get also suggests the fighter here. So this is the boon of combat prowess. Again, as always, you get an ability score improvement by 1, etc. to the maximum of 30, which I think is fun. But then you have peerless aim. It just says when you miss with an attack roll, you can hit instead. Once you've used it, you cannot use it again to the start of your next turn. That's bloody cool. Like, if you're doing your, as you said, your action surges and with these extra attacks, you're going to be going a lot. And if you're like, you miss one, you're like, I think I want to hit. I don't need to roll that again. I just hit, and then you go, I can't use it again to the next turn, but then you might be using your action surge again, all that sort of thing, because you've got several at this point. So I just think that's again, I like that idea that, again, we sort of said like the dice tell a story, and if you roll badly, but at this level, you've probably got very high to attack. You've probably got some magic like weapons and stuff like that. So you can just go, I missed that last one. Out of 8, I only hit 7 times. Let's change that final one to be an actual hit. And like, boom. And again, you can just really narrate a proper like fighting sequence and just finish them off with a final sort of cut. Something about that. I just think it's just really cool.
Yeah, that back and forth too of like, what if I as the person running it, describe that they block with their shield, or now I'm thinking too much of anime. 'Cause you've said it.
It is very anime. That's the thing.
But like the idea that they just grab the sword and do you shift the way you're holding it and slide it across their palm, down their arm, and the idea of like letting the verbal component. We're not casting spells. That's not what people say when they talk about things. The verbal component of the action, but like resolving that and then having the fighter say, no, I would like to have it hit, and then putting it on them to say, okay, then how do you get past that? What do you do? And having that back and forth, especially with these maneuvers. And I think part of the fighter and the versatility that they've added, I think in its own interesting way, will make combat more engaging for other people, because you have so many different maneuvers, so many different actions that you can take that then need descriptions or can have descriptions, that I think it'll like kind of elevate everyone's ideas of what they can do with their classes and actions and the verbal components of a battle. Done.
We know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Sorry, you can't cast that. You didn't bring a diamond.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, as far as like incorporating the new rules, incorporating the fighters into your games moving forward, what are some ways that you have or that you're thinking about it now that we've kind of chatted? I know I have always leaned on fighters for town and city guards, or bodyguards, like you said earlier, Fiona, that kind of thing. But I haven't really used them as, villains or prominent NPCs, just because I haven't, I've kind of been lacking the vision. So yeah, I feel like this has kind of given me some new fun things to play with, some new ways I might try. What about you two?
I think for me, we always joke about like, oops, all rogues, oops, all bards. But I think the challenge of oops, all fighters, and then having like, hey, but you've got these flavors of fighters. Like, I know I keep talking about Tasha's, but like you have 12 different sort of you could all go for that subclass of the battle master and take a different archetype, and then be like, why are these groups of fighters traveling together? Are they all like the shock troop battle master build, and you're going to do like your own fantasy version of aliens, so that's the thing I was thinking of, is that like maybe because I feel like I want to make fighters interesting for players, I like the idea of maybe having like as a villain and stuff like that. But I think actually getting players to really play with it, and then seeing like, well, I'm the shock trooper, or I'm the pugilist, I'm this. How does that work? And then going back into that relationship stuff I was talking about earlier, that's how I would put it. I would give the challenge to the players, like, you're all fighters. What kind of fighters are you? What are you doing? And then from there, I can build the story around them. It's more sort of proactive role play, which I'm a big fan of. I want to hear what the players want to do, and then go, oh, so you've got these sort of big beats that you want to hit. Well, there's definitely a faction that could absolutely crush that or take stuff away. Maybe they come across their rivals, which is oops, all spellcasters, or oops, all paladins, and they have to deal with the smugness of that. You know what I mean?
That a game where you're just where you're just beefing with the rival.
Yeah, with the paladins,
group.
I think so. Yeah, because they've got nice shiny armor, and they've got obviously their god who bless them with powers, and you're like, we are equally, if not better. And yeah,
it would be like the private school kids, right? Like
100%. Yes, the smugness. but then again, rivals is such a big thing where you can have a quest when you're like, oh well, this rival team's done really well, and it's like, oh, of course it's all the paladins, or of course it's all the spellcasters, and you have like your typical edgelord warlock. You've got the cool charismatic bard who's just a nice guy. It's like, well done, team, you've done really well. And you're like, oh, hate that guy. It's that sort of. That sort of vibe. That's how I see it. Like, I'd love to challenge the players to like come up with some interesting characters, but all playing from the same character sheet.
Yeah, I like the idea. I mean, if you're trying to showcase what a fighter can be, because that's the other thing to think of is, am I needing to do that? Do I have players that are less versed in all of this? One of the ways that because we've said anime twice now, is that if you look towards all of their tournaments, like that's a really good setup that you could easily implement in the world to say, here are all these people that are fighting. It is literally a fighters tournament. And then you show all of the different ways that can be done. One of the other things that I think is important for like implementing it is who's teaching you to do this, because a lot of the other classes start to have like more narrow pathways. The cleric has a deity that they're specifically with. The warlock has a patron. The sorcerer has their bloodline. The ranger typically may have no one, maybe has someone, but I feel like the fighter, it could be group setting. It could be one-on-one training. It could literally just be you bashing your head against the idea until you figure it out. But so I think one of the other ways that is really important is like, where did this character learn these skills, or where do they continue to learn them, depending on how you have normal level up, do you have milestone level up? Are they required to go back to where they were from? Like, is it a more traditional martial arts style where they're literally the way they're leveling up is proving that they are capable of leveling up, and they literally have a belt system? Or, there's on and on and on, and even like the complexity of that, and having two rival schools, just even of their ideas of what a fighter should be. So I think one of the big things is definitely figuring out like where they've learned and how that learning environment is viewed worldwide. Because it could be that they wear a belt and immediately go into an area where that is not okay. Or they go into an area where they're immediately accepted because they have trained under so-and-so. And again, you could be very smug about it. You can be very humble about it. No, we got to be humble. Those paladins are the smug ones.
Yeah, you could just get challenged in the streets because you're wearing that specific belt, right? You go to a new town and they're like, oh, so-and-so killed my cousin or whatever, and now I'm getting revenge. Anyway, there's so many ways to take it. I really like that in the new rules they've included the battle master out of the box in the book. So that's one of the first subclasses. The champion, which is familiar, the Eldritch Knight, which is familiar, and then the Psi Warrior, which is pretty fun. It's almost Jedi-esque in its description of their kind of ability. They haven't really delved into psionics much in 5e yet, and so the 2024 rules are kind of starting to introduce that. It'll be interesting to see how many people are playing these Psi Warriors, because I feel like it'll be pretty popular. But yeah, I think it would be fun, like you said, Neal, to do a tournament and you've got like people with these different subclasses, and you can kind of see how different you can flavor the same base character, right?
Like, I can imagine that you have like a tournament, jousting or whatnot, or like, archery, like all these sort of competitions. But then that they all have to take part of, almost like a team sport in a way. That could be fun as well. Because you always think like, the monks, they'll be the ones in the athletics club. But actually, I think fighters are the backbone of it all. So whether you want to have like you talk about that idea of rivals, like, I don't like your tabards. Again, I'm just thinking of sports teams like, hey, screw that guy, because they're wearing a different tabard to you. Again, that you're a rival fighter team that's come to this wrestling pit or whatever, and against the local heroes, and then something goes down. I think that could be it's just telling that different story a little bit more interestingly. Because I always think, like, again, when you think of D&D, it's high fantasy. There's going to be a dragon at some point, there's going to be a dungeon at some point. But what if you just told a really boring story of an away game, of a match, or of like, and how can you make that extraordinary, even though you're all playing like, you know, your fighters, your jousters, and the intern, the I don't know what they're called now, but not the knave, but the boy that comes with you, the mascot or whatever, and see where you go
Squire?
from there. You know,
Squire, yeah.
Squire, yes,
Mascot.
yes,
Funny.
exactly, yeah.
You make him dress up and put on a
Entertain, boy, yeah, exactly.
But I mean, all of this makes me think of like building out like a really interesting one shot, because there's certain aspects where it's very easy to make modern technology exist in this world because surprise, magic, and the idea of being in a tavern watching an away game with fans of both sides that then as it's happening get into this giant brawl and like having to navigate that sort of thing would be a super fun way to, because like you said, you're watching this away game, and is it the thing that motivates the group of fighters to become their own team and then go on? Is like, because that could be your entire campaign, where it's literally they're trying to be the best fighter group in the world. And it all starts with a tavern brawl where they're fighting, because gods forbid that the Faerun fighters win another championship or something along those lines. And then we will say terrible things about them because of the championships they have won, of course.
It just becomes Cobra Kai, really, like at that point. Yeah, that'd be so funny. To close it out, we always like to give our listeners some homework. The homework is usually like stuff you can watch or read or that kind of thing that will give you more inspiration based on the topic we were talking about. I did just mention Cobra Kai. I feel like that's my cop-out answer if we're talking like, you know, fighting clubs and trying to introduce what rivalries between different factions of fighters could be like. But there's, like I said at the beginning, there's so many fantasy characters that fit the fighter archetype that it's almost hard to pick a few shows or movies or books to point people to. I just played a one shot with a brand new player who built a fighter, and he based it off Mad Mardigan from Willow. I feel like he's definitely a good person to kind of look at, who's a fighter but who's got more character depth than just, you know, being able to swing a sword, or you kind of learn more about him, and he definitely goes through a good journey. So that's what I'm going to say. Watch Willow and take notes.
Weirdly, my go-to is quite an old cultural touchstone now, but it is A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger in it. Because it is a solid film. It might not stand up to today's standards in terms of like representation and stuff, but I think Heath Ledger in that film is actually cracking. Like, obviously, you know, he left us before his time, I felt, but if you watch that film, he's very charismatic. He's the perfect charm without being over the top. You have the bard-like character, you have his sort of like squires around him.
Yeah.
But I think it's a cool way of looking at it. And then on the flip side, obviously, you know, if you're wanting to be more of a solo, more edgelord thing, I think the go-to one is always going to be Gladiator. You know, it's that sort of like that determination, the motivation of vengeance. Again, maybe has not aged well. We don't want to have, you know, dead women and children as motivations for like your edgelord stuff. But I think that's certainly that first film. I will say I've not seen the second film yet. But you know, it's still that sort of vibe of like, you know, I am a fighter. I'm going to use these tactics in the gladiator pit. It's just really cool. And again, you've got like the tactician or the strategist as well, and Tasha's as well, if you want to build that using up the different feats and stuff. So I was like, perfect. What if you did have a Colosseum type fight? That could be really cool. And like, you have someone that is the strategist, you have someone who is the brawler, you know, and have those different levels. So yeah, those are the two things I could think of. Like, if you want the more sort of like story narrative, like maybe a bit more in depth or character you can jump off of, maybe Heath Ledger in A Knight's Tale, and then Gladiator as a sort of more like his cool set pieces you could do as your character, and then telling your GM, hey, I'd love a Colosseum fight. Especially if you're going to use stuff like Theros, the sort of the Magic the Gathering setting as well, where you can have sort of those sort of ancient Greek myths going in, you know, play your own Hercules, that sort of thing.
Yes. I need to rewatch both of those movies now because they were really good when I watched them, and I've forgotten how good they are. Good choices.
The movie you obviously need to watch is The 13th Warrior.
Oh,
okay. Listen.
There it is.
Okay. First off, I think it's the best D&D movie that has ever been made. It literally just starts and keeps going. I am not trying to say then that it is the best movie ever made, but I think it is the best movie example of a D&D campaign, because the next thing. But what I didn't realize is they're all just fighters. Because there's not magic really involved with the group. And so, but they all have very different approaches to the way that they fight. So much so that they constantly it's a bunch of giant Norsemen who make fun of Antonio Banderas, who's questionably playing someone. Yeah, there's a lot of questions, but we can move past them. So, but like they make fun of him the whole time, but his development and his character. But again, seeing each person as their own individual person. But at the end of the day, they are 100% all just fighters, and working together, but using each other's different skills. Because that's the other thing I think when you make a group, not all choosing the same skills. Am I really good at X? The thieves' tools or something like that. I'm the one that does that because that's become my role, because we're in a group of fighters and somebody needs to learn to do this certain thing. Am I the face? And I go up and I'm the one that always talks because that's the role that I've taken in this group. But at the end of the day, we're probably all going to try and stab, because we are all fighters. The anime examples that I have, I realize aren't as applicable. They are good for like larger story beats and things like that. But the one thing that I will say that is a really deep cut and very weird, are the very first UFCs. So like UFC 1, 2, they didn't have weight classes. They didn't know what they were doing. It was literally just actual real world fighters thrown into a cage and fighting each other. There was one guy who used one glove and that was totally okay. Then the Gracies showed up with jujitsu and they're like, oh no, we need to figure this out a little more. And then they started having weight classes and all of these different things. But the first UFC is a true sight to be.
Yeah. I'd also just on that as well. Yeah. If you watch any UFC fights that were filmed in the pandemic, you'll be able to tell me if this is true, but they obviously had a place called Death Island where they could have all these fighters come in to be COVID tested, all that sort of thing, to play. But obviously there was no audience, no nothing. So it's just incredible, like fighting that you're just hearing all the punches and the kicks, but it's dead silent, like almost like some sort of weird soap opera that's happening. And it's brutal. But I definitely, it was one of those things where everything was removed. And the same with like worldwide wrestling as well. That sort of thing, they'd have these moments of the kayfabe and stuff like that, and then they go, right, it's time to fight. But there was like silence, there was no audience cheering at all. So I like that idea of like talking about that 13th floor and seeing each individual person. Yeah, I just think you can have a lot of fun with that. Think about what those moments look like without a crowd. So how do these fighters look like before they go in to fight in the arena? Having that quiet moment. Again, just thinking about how you would play that and roleplay it or set up those scenes as a GM.
It was so quiet during that time that in a post-fight interview, they asked a guy, hey, we noticed that in round 2, you changed your tactic and started doing this. Like, what made you think of that? He's like, oh, well, I could hear the commentator say that that's what I should do. So then I did, and I won.
No way.
It was so
Amazing.
Quiet. Oh, and the hits, the kicks were visceral because, there was no one there. And all the same microphone setups, as there always would be, were set up still. And it was, but my favorite moment will always be, so why did you make that tactical change? It's like, oh, well, they said so over there. So I thought I'd try it and it worked great. And then I won the fight.
That is crazy. I've never heard anyone ever say that in a sporting
because
event
they sit right there ringside,
wow.
like just like the judges. Yeah.
I know. I just feel like no one has ever said I took someone else's advice who was just like saying stuff. I mean, commentators usually have experience, but still, I've never heard it. That's cool. Well, Fiona, thank you so much for coming on the DM's block and spitting some wisdom, sharing some of your insights. We appreciate it heavily. Please, Fiona, tell the people, the good people, where they can hear you, where they can follow you, where they can learn more about what you do.
Oh, thank you guys. Very much appreciate it. It's always nice to talk about some D&D and the like. If you're interested, I am the host of What Am I Rolling, which is a twice-monthly tabletop RPG one-shot podcast, which does lots of different RPG systems, not necessarily D&D. And we also do interviews with game designers. If you're like, Fiona, that sounds awful, I just want to talk about Dungeons and or Dragons. I'm like, yes, okay. We also have the DM's Book Club, which is a weekly book club podcast where we talk about some Dungeons and Dragons and discuss how we might include it and improve it for your role-playing campaigns. We read the books so you don't have to. That's What Am I Rolling and the DM's Book Club wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you guys so much for having me on. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. And listeners, I can highly recommend both of Fiona's shows. I have listened to most all of them. And if you are ever trying to learn a new system, odds are that she has played it or has run it, and you can go and listen, and she will kind of briefly explain the rules at the beginning, and then you get to hear the insanity that follows. And also the DM's Book Club is fantastic too. They, if you're ever looking for maybe more like specific information about the game, that is a great source. Whereas DM's Block, we kind of talk about more nebulous, more amorphous ideas. The DM's Book Club is definitely focused exactly on the rules and on the mechanics and exactly how you can use them. So a great source for that kind of information.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm.
If I was on a Facebook group and someone was saying, hey, what are your favorite podcasts? And I saw someone else say, I love the DM's Book Club. And so I sent that to Fiona, but that means that at least one other person also agrees that it is a good show.
Hey.
John
Tkalsich
says it's a good show too. So listen to John.
And I can say with the utmost confidence, we will definitely need to have you back on. We just want to thank Fiona again for coming on, spending some time with us, talking about fighters, giving me the opportunity to tell you to watch 13th Warrior again. But of course, if you've watched 13th Warrior and you want to tell us about it, or if you want to tell us about how you've been implementing fighters, especially if you have really off-the-wall or interesting builds that you've had at your table, you can always email us at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com.
If you'd like to review the show and push us up the old algorithm, head to your podcatcher of choice and say nice things about us. You can head to Apple Podcasts or Podchaser or Good Pods, leave us a 5-star review, and we'll read it on the show.
And if you go to your social media of choice, good on ya. And you can typically find us at DMS_block or Dungeon Masters Block. Go there, find us. And if we're not there, send us a message. Not on that platform, but you can email us and let us know that we should go there too. And as always,
the Dungeon Master.
Oh, okay. This is for you.
No, keep going.
And as always, the Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, where you can check out other shows like Knocked Prone, Bad Venture Club, Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, Titans of Altera, and all the other ones that are there too. They're coming. Who knows? Yeah,
there's some exciting news on the Block Party Podcast Network front. Our friends Knocked Prone are starting recording a brand new show. Do you remember what it's called?
Oh, we're not just our D&D characters. I've actually been on there, and it was wonderful. It's really interesting. And then you get to hear me not making as many jokes, so maybe you like that.
And our friends at the Bad Venture Club are very close to recording their final episode. They are not on their final episode releasing yet, but they're recording their final episode, and that should be out within the next few months, and they'll be planning their very exciting season 2 as well. So lots of fun stuff happening on the Block Party Podcast Network front. Thank you for listening to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God,
killing fighters,
and lowering the egos of all the other people at the table. I'm DM Derrick, saying you should think outside the bun.
I'm DM Neal. Stay classy, blockheads.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
If you want to figure out who's the best fighter at the table, throw a live knife in the middle.
Oh, we'll have tryouts.
Live knife!
Goodbye.